New Democrats believe that our democracy is so fundamentally important because people are experiencing the impacts of the votes that they do. We see directly in people's lives right now that people are struggling with housing because liberals and conservatives haven't built enough affordable housing. People are struggling with the cost of living crisis because liberals and conservatives haven't done enough to make sure that Canadians have the supports they need. And our healthcare system is struggling because liberals and conservatives haven't done enough to help Canadians. So we want people to vote. We think voting is so important, but foreign interference directly concerns people and makes them feel like, what's the point of voting? And we want to make sure that we address that apathy. So we take it very seriously, and that's why we maintain our position that there needs to be a public inquiry. There needs to be an independent process that's public and transparent so Canadians have confidence in our electoral process. Because what we have in the alternative is conservatives that are very interested in playing games, but not interested in actually finding solutions to the problems that we're up against. And the Liberals continue to throw up roadblocks, which does not help restore confidence in our electoral system. So today, if the Liberal government, if Justin Trudeau doesn't stop the obstruction that's going on in committee, if Justin Trudeau doesn't allow his chief of staff to testify, we will force him to do so by voting with the Opposition Day motion. We're going to make it very clear that we believe in doing everything possible to make sure Canadians have their questions answered so we can restore confidence in our electoral system. Donc aujourd'hui, je veux dire clairement pour les néo-démocrates, notre système de démocratie, c'est fondamental. Nos élections sont fondamentales parce que les impacts des gens, les impacts que les gens subissent sont directement le résultat des élus. Et on a des grands défis. Donc, on veut que les gens ont confiance dans notre système de démocratie et des élections. C'est pourquoi on maintient notre position qu'on a besoin d'une enquête indépendante pour répondre aux questions assez sérieuses comme l'agence étrangère. Et on a dans ce contexte maintenant une partie conservateur qui veut jouer des jeux politiques et une partie libérale qui bloque les essais de savoir des réponses pour les questions importantes. Donc aujourd'hui, si le gouvernement libéral, si Justin Trudeau n'arrête pas l'obstruction dans le comité, s'il ne permet pas le chef de cabinet de Justin Trudeau de témoigner, on va les forcer de le faire en appuyant la journée de l'opposition aujourd'hui. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Why do you think it's so important for Katie Telford to testify about this issue?
Right now, there's a lot of serious questions about what the Prime Minister's office knew, when they knew it, and what they did about that. We would prefer that there was a public inquiry that was investigating this and finding out those answers. In the meantime, these questions are very important, and so we want to make sure that Canadians have an opportunity to hear what was known and when it was known and what was done with that information.
So can you clarify, does that mean that you will be voting with the Conservative motion, or have you been given a tell that Ms. Telford will agree to testify before the vote this afternoon?
We are saying very clearly, if the Liberal government does not stop the obstruction in committee, the committee is meeting in about 10 minutes from now, if that obstruction does not stop, and if the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau doesn't permit his chief of staff to testify, then we will force them to do that.
Did the Liberals discuss making this a confidence matter with you?
That has never come up, and that is not my understanding that it's not confidence.
Did you get assurances from the Prime Minister that they'll stop the filibuster at Proc?
We are saying very clearly, if they do not stop this obstruction in committee and they don't allow the motion to go forward that will ensure that the chief of staff of Justin Trudeau testifies in that committee, then we will force them to do that by voting with the opposition motion.
La décision pourrait changer, M. Singh, d'ici cet après-midi, c'est ce qu'on comprend. Est-ce que votre décision pourrait changer d'ici 15 heures cet après-midi?
La décision est clairement, si le gouvernement n'arrête pas, si Justin Trudeau n'arrête pas l'obstruction dans le comité et s'il ne permet pas le chef de cabinet de Justin Trudeau de témoigner, on va les forcer de faire ça en appuyant la journée de l'opposition.
Aujourd'hui, M. Singh, vous allez décider aujourd'hui s'il y a encore trop d'obstruction.
On va décider dans quelques minutes. Effectivement, ça veut dire dans 10 minutes. C'est là où on va voir si le gouvernement arrête l'obstruction ou non, s'il permet Katie Telford, le chef de cabinet de Justin Trudeau, de témoigner ou non. Et si ils n'arrêtent pas ce qui se passe dans le comité, on va les forcer.
Did you discuss this directly with the Prime Minister? Did you lay that out to him yourself?
I've said clearly, both publicly and privately, that one, we need a public inquiry, and we need questions answered. In the meantime, absent a public inquiry process, the only process we have is the committee work. I don't think that's the best forum for it. That's why I've said that we need a public inquiry, and I've said that publicly and privately that we need a public inquiry.
Him in a meeting.
I've said it publicly and privately
Why don't you clarify? I mean, we know that you speak with the Prime Minister as part of your deal, so why not just be clear?
I've said it publicly and I've said it privately to the Prime Minister, both, that we need a public inquiry and that we need to make sure that Canadians get an opportunity to hear questions answered. And there's a lot of serious questions that need answered.
Just to be clear then, you're willing to accept the fact that this could go to the Ethics Committee at some point with Katie Telford being there and the whole list of people that the Conservatives want to bring forward. You're willing to go the whole gamut if the Prime Minister doesn't allow Katie Telford to speak?
Well, we're saying very clearly that there's an opportunity in 10 minutes where the government's going to show us if they stop the obstruction and if they allow the Chief of Staff to testify, then if they don't do that, then we will support the opposition motion, which is the entirety of that motion.
So you want to appear at PROC, you want the committee that's filibustering right now to stop that, her appear there, and if that doesn't happen, you'll vote with the other parties on it. Okay.
That's correct.
Can you clarify, why don't you want the rest of, so you're willing to vote against the Conservative Opposition Day motion if Telford testifies at committee? Why does the NDP want the rest of what's in that Conservative motion? Why would you support that anyways?
We have in PROC a motion that's going to happen very, very shortly that includes a number of other individuals that go beyond just the Chief of Staff. We think that should move ahead. The Liberals have been blocking that. If they stop blocking that, well, they have a choice. They can stop blocking that and they can allow the Chief of Staff to testify and the others that were included in that motion, or we'll force them to do that.
À quel point le fait qu'on vient d'apprendre que ce ne sera pas un vote de confiance a joué dans la vigueur de votre décision de possiblement voter avec la motion des conservateurs?
Donc, pour nous, toujours, on a été en faveur d'une enquête publique. C'est pourquoi on a présenté cette motion dans le comité. Donc, ça, c'est notre numéro 1 priorité. C'est une enquête publique. Les gens méritent d'avoir un processus indépendant et public.
Donc, ça peut influencer votre décision?
Et puis, on a dit qu'on ne veut pas avoir une élection, on veut avoir une enquête publique. On ne veut pas avoir une élection, on veut savoir que nos élections sont libres d'ingérence étrangère. Ça, c'est notre but, de s'assurer que pour la prochaine élection, les gens ont confiance qu'on peut voter sans avoir aucun élément d'ingérence.
Mr. Singh, you said you were worried that the committee could be a circus, and that's not what you want. But you seem to be willing, possibly, to go with the circus as opposed to waiting for the rapporteur.
The dilemma that we're up against is that we know that Canadians have some serious questions that need to be answered. The committee work is not my preferred path. It's clear that the Liberals and the Conservatives both are more interested in playing games there. Conservatives are not interested in actually safeguarding democracy. It's clear if you watch the committee that that's not their goal. Their goal is to attack the government instead of finding ways to assure we know exactly what happened in terms of interference and how we can protect our democracy. That's not what they're interested in. And the Liberals are more interested in putting blocks in place, and that's a problem as well. In the absence of a public inquiry, we need to make sure that Canadians have an opportunity to have questions answered. I think the last question.
On apprend que le rapporteur spécial a jusqu'au 23 mai pour déclencher ou pas une enquête publique. Est-ce que c'est trop tard pour vous?
Pour nous, on a voulu avoir une enquête il y a des semaines, il y a longtemps qu'on a demandé ça. Donc pour nous, c'est toujours ce qu'on exige le gouvernement de faire. On exige qu'on ait une enquête publique parce que ça, c'est la seule façon de vraiment rétablir la confiance dans notre système et aussi de donner un processus qui est public. Merci beaucoup.
Do you guys have a deal with the Liberals on political staffers?
Pouvez-vous nous dire dans 10 minutes votre décision?